Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing, and that's badasswoodart.com. Remember to use promo code CTPocket at that'sbadasswoodart.com for 20% off any one piece of wood art. Fortunate enough to have sports dad Judd Zulgad of Skor North, Vikings Wire. You know where to find him on any social media platform, but he's gracious enough to join us to talk about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell's press conferences at the NFL Combine. So let's just dive right into it. A lot yesterday from Kwesi. Some of the takeaways I obviously had was leaving out of Eric Kendricks and Jordan Hicks. Obviously, he talked a lot about Flores. Curious to see what your thoughts were from Kwesi's press conference.
Well, I guess my major takeaway, and I think it's written about a lot too, was his quarterback comments.
Yes.
He took a comment about, or he took a question at the podium about quarterbacks, and the question never involved Kirk Cousins, and he turned it into sort of a Kirk answer, which I found to be intriguing. And basically, he was talking about how he looks at things from a quantitative standpoint, where Kirk is at now, age-wise, what Kirk can and can't do, and as he said, Kirk can win, like Kirk is still there. But then he talked about how you also have to evaluate how long that window for a quarterback that age is. And all in all, my takeaway, and I think the most important thing from like what O'Connell and Kwesi and anyone says at the Combine is to try to read between the lines as best as possible, because it's all sort of planted there between the lines. And by the way, things just do change. So like what they think today might change. But I took away from that I don't think they're going to sign Kirk to any type of extension. Like maybe they would do another 1-year extension, but they clearly, it's sounding like, just trying to put the piece of the puzzle together, Matt, it sounds like the Kirk camp would probably like one more big contract, one more extension that is substantial. And that would probably be Kirk's last contract. And what I heard Kwesi saying was, hold on a second, that's not necessarily how we're going to operate. And without being a Kirk hater, I think it's very fair to say it's interesting in what the adapting and what they're going to do as far as finding their next quarterback, when that is going to be. And make no mistake, Kevin O'Connell was hired in large part to do exactly that. Like he was hired to come in here and immediately make Kirk as successful as possible, and they won 13 games. And that's impressive. And until the last game when Kirk was statistically great, I mean, hell, until the last offensive play, his stats might have been down, but quite frankly, I don't care. I thought Kirk Cousins did a very nice job. That being said, he's not going to be the quarterback here in perpetuity. And so what I heard was sort of the steps of, okay, we're going to have to identify, and especially Kevin is, and then coach that guy up. And so if you combine that with what O'Connell at the podium said today, when again asked a very general question about quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, and coaching them. And I think the question was, is that the hardest position to coach? So again, it had nothing to do with the Vikings per se. And O'Connell didn't get into Kirk, but he did talk extensively about what it takes to develop that player both mentally and physically. And I just find it so interesting, because if Kevin O'Connell's here for 2 years, 5 years, or 20 years, I think that this next quarterback decision is going to be the one thing that defines him. Like if there's a Super Bowl, right? If there is the ultimate success. And if you think about it this way, I think this is the best way to articulate it, to put sort of the gravity of the situation correctly, is this. Kevin O'Connell is looking for the first long-term franchise quarterback in Vikings history, as is the team, since Fran Tarkenton.
Yeah.
I mean, Dante was here for, in the spectrum of things, a tick. And when he was good in 2004, he was unbelievable. But, Brett Favre was going to have no shelf life here. Tommy Kramer did a nice job, as did Wade Wilson probably, but that was a different era, and they were certainly not what you would consider franchise quarterbacks. And I know it's way back when, but, from 1961 to 66, and then when he came back around 72 to 78, Fran Tarkenton's really the last guy that you can hang your hat on as a long-term franchise quarterback that the Vikings have ever had since 1961.
Yeah. And to your point back about the contract extension with Kirk Cousins, Matthew Collar had that piece today that he released through Bring Me the Sports News, and they talked a little bit. Kwesi gave a little bit more insight to that contract extension discussion with Kirk, and pretty much said, like, from their side, they want it as certain as possible. And from our side, we want flexibility. And that's one thing we haven't had with Kirk Cousins contracts in previous seasons. So to your point, things could be changing pretty quickly here for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, and that's just not true with Kirk, Matt. That's true with the entire team. Like, that's true with a lot of this team. That's true with Thielen. That's true with Kendricks. That's true with Patrick Peterson and Jordan Hicks. And perhaps Zadarius Smith might be one and done. Danielle Hunter needs a contract extension. Is he coming back? Harrison Smith. I think the Vikings would like him back, but ideally he restructures and comes down. So, this is not just a Kirk thing. The quarterback is the lightning rod, and it's the most intriguing one to talk about. But, there are a lot of decisions that Kwesi and his staff and O'Connell have to make about a lot of guys, Dalvin Cook, a lot of guys who have been very popular in this town for a long time and have had success. But you know what? Loyalty in football is something that'll get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to commit to Kirk now and be like, well, he's good enough, and you're going to pay him what he wants, there's one major problem here, too. And it's not a problem. It's a good problem. But Justin Jefferson is going to get paid. And Justin Jefferson, at the end of the day, is going to be making something along the lines of what a quarterback is. Now, if you tell me that, and I've heard this, should they look at trading him, to which I think that would be crazy. But if you're going to do that and you're going to re-sign Kirk, then you better think that Kirk can carry you to a Super Bowl essentially by himself. The Kansas City Chiefs could trade Tyreek Hill because Patrick Mahomes is that good.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill is now, the Dolphins made him the highest paid receiver, average annual value of contract in the National Football League, which I think Jefferson will now exceed him. But that's a rare situation where you can turn around and say, you know what, dude, you are really good, but our quarterback's so good, we don't care. And I just don't see a scenario under which the Vikings, under any circumstance, would explore trading a guy like Jefferson, who is absolutely a franchise player. And unlike a lot of guys, including Kirk, Justin Jefferson is near the best of what he does in the entire league. We can debate
23.
Kirk. Yeah, but we could debate Kirk top 10, right? Like, we can debate that. I think he ordinarily falls just outside of the top 10. But it's no debate about, is Kirk Cousins top 3? Like, that's just a non-starter of a discussion. Justin Jefferson is 23. You're exactly right. He just led the league in receptions and receiving yards. And today at the podium, Kevin O'Connell said, I'm not kidding here. It sounds crazy, but he and I have just scratched the surface of what we can do with this offense.
Calling him one of the most favorite players he's ever coached.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
It's also really intriguing because rare is the team, coach, a lot of times, certainly GM, rare is the team that, knowing they're going to have to go up against a guy in a contract negotiation, spills the platitudes that Kwesi and Kevin have. And that just speaks to, one, how special Jefferson is, and two, if you think that there's any chance on God's green earth that, they might explore trading him, just stop right now. They're not making any phone calls. They're not considering it. I think they'll turn the roster over around him. And I think that they will have confidence O'Connell can draft a quarterback and develop that guy on a team-controlled contract for, approximately 5 years. But all of that being said, Justin Jefferson is special. And the Vikings know that. And they basically have a GM and coach who are like, we're going to have to pay him. We don't care. Here's how special this kid is.
Yeah, they would mention Justin Jefferson in each of those press conferences, in both of them, Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell. Like, you could visually see their excitement just talking about him. And to your point about even potentially the thought of trading Justin Jefferson, it literally came out that they're consulting him on how to build the roster.
And you know what, to a large degree, so there are some players I would say that's really dumb. Until he proves to me that he is not as legit a player and legit a person as a player, like, I know nothing about the kid off the field, okay? So I just want to make that clear. Seems like a good kid, but I don't know. But as far as what he's done on the field as a leader, as a player, he has shown me nothing that says he shouldn't be trusted. So like I am a definite stand here. Like I will tell you this. I think that he is that special. And hopefully the Vikings can eventually find a quarterback who is a draft pick to pair with him. But I also think when O'Connell talked about this as well, and about Jefferson in particular, I'm not sure how you interpret this, but I think part of the scratched the surface, we have only scratched the surface of what we can do offensively. I think part of that comes back to they have their eyes set, no question, on getting a speedy number 2 receiver to stretch the field, because I think they know one problem was focusing on Jefferson became too simple. Now, he still had unbelievable games and made great catches, but can you imagine if you have a guy over the top who scares you, and now you got to sort of pick your poison? I mean, there's a lot to like there.
And you throw in Hawkinson in that mix as well.
True. Yep.
That's a lethal force on offense, and I'm sure Kevin O'Connell can't wait to potentially put something like that together. Speaking of O'Connell, any takeaways from his presser today other than like the Justin Jefferson conversation?
Yes, I thought that it was interesting when asked about the secondary, and again, very generic, just, hey, how does the secondary, what's your valuation, I think was the word used there. He actually went into and started it with a long answer on Lewis Cine and said he's at the facility every single day. He's working hard. He's in my office bugging me, which O'Connell likes. I took that to mean that if Lewis Cine is fully recovered from the compound fracture he suffered in week 4 against the Saints, that he is going to be a starter. I don't know what happened last year, and I'm not saying that he is not to fault some, but I found it very odd that your first round safety fell behind a guy who was a, 4th round pick in 2021.
Yeah.
And Cam Bynum's fine, but Lewis Cine's your first round pick. And like the Vikings, when they draft him, we're talking about the impact that he was going to have as this versatile sort of hybrid player. And like I was excited for it. I thought, okay, he's sort of a hybrid safety linebacker. He's going to come in and give you speed, but he's going to, at times at least, lower the boom. And if I'm not mistaken, defensively, he had 3 snaps before he got hurt. He missed the first game, but that's 3 games. So what I heard there was Brian Flores is going to find a way to use him. And on that note, I found when Kevin was asked about Brian Flores, it was very insightful. I think that question was asked about how Flores was gauging the personnel that the Vikings have. And O'Connell made 2 things very clear. One is, I think he made it very clear that if you are a longtime Vikings fan and you love the veteran defensive core, brace yourself. I think a lot of those guys are gone. And because, speed. I mean, the linebackers were entirely too slow. And the other thing that I found intriguing was O'Connell talking about Flores' ability to be aggressive and adapt. And I said this to Phil and Dex this week, too. I don't know what Ed Donatel promised. Like, it was the Fangio scheme, right?
Right.
But in retrospect, I don't know what Ed Donatel told them he had learned from Vic or what he was going to bring. But I remember, thinking, oh man, it's going to be multiple. It's going to be interesting. It's going to change that there's going to be, it's going to be 3-4, but it's going to be 4-3. But I think that they're going to try these different things. And then they sort of never did. So I think the expectation here, and I think O'Connell got this right, Matt. I think the expectation is that Brian Flores is going to be far more the vision of the versatility. I think O'Connell wants a defensive coach who is like he is offensively, which is constantly adjusting. And both of those guys, so O'Connell was a 3rd round pick of the Patriots as a quarterback in 2008. Flores had been with the Patriots, I think, in a front office personnel role before that, but 2008 was his first year as a special teams assistant. And the one thing that Belichick, for as curmudgeonly as he might seem in old school, Bill Belichick is a master, or he was in his heyday, of adjusting things. I covered I think it was the 2006 Halloween game here that the Patriots came in and absolutely schooled Childress and the Vikings. And I think it was that. I think it might have been that game. I was talking to a reporter because I was on the beat for the Star Tribune. I was talking to a reporter from out there who covered the Patriots. And I said, what's the offensive scheme there? West Coast, blah, blah, blah. And he said, they don't have one. They call it a game plan offense, which means they're going to figure out what you don't do well, and then they're going to exploit it. And sure enough, in that game, against a run defense for the Vikings that was unbelievable. What did Bill come in and do with Brady? Dumped off the ball, threw quick passes, and they beat the Vikings badly. So I think the thing with Flores as well is we are going to see a defense that adjusts to the opponent, which Donatel threatened to do, but then he didn't really do it. That simple.
Yeah, well, even to your Flores point, like in his press conference when they introduced him a few weeks ago, somebody asked him, what is the scheme you're going to run? And he even pointed out it's going to depend kind of week to week. We're going to take that approach into every different opponent. And O'Connell, even today in his presser, touched on the fact that he really admires the way that Flores can just do it a bunch of different ways, is I think what the quote was. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think to your point about Lewis Cine and getting faster on defense, like this is going to be – I get excited because I know it's not going to be an overnight rebuild, obviously, but there's some young guys that deserve a little bit more reps. You're going to get those young corners back, and I think there's potential to get this team firing, even if it's just league average.
If you're going to get burned being aggressive.
Exactly.
Like if there's nothing more torturous to a fan base than having to watch a passive defense.
Well, we saw it last year.
We're going to stop. If I never hear again, we're going to stop the deep pass at all costs because we're, basically playing a two shell in which Harrison Smith is, it is, despite the picks, I thought that the 2022 use of Harrison Smith was atrocious. Yeah. Here's this guy who's basically a coach on the field, and you're putting him as a deep safety to pick off some balls. Okay, that's great, but he had so much more to offer, so much more savvy, right? So many more disguises. Where were those disguises consistently? And it seemed like O'Connell had to give Donatel a talking to at times. It was, I think it was in the last month where the Fox broadcast, I think it was Mark Schler, said, that O'Connell told Ed, "You're too predictable. Change it up." The second that you have to say that, you probably should just fire the person. Flores, if nothing else, I'm counting on this, will not be predictable.
I hope you're right. Any final takeaways from the pressers today?
Let's see. What else? O'Connell said a lot, but almost nothing, to your point. Mm-hmm. I thought reading between the lines of Kwesi was a little bit more intriguing. Now, Kwesi also doesn't talk much. Yeah. And I feel like when he does, he sort of can't help himself, which is outstanding. And so, at least there's an interpretation. O'Connell's got and this is not a dig, but O'Connell's got it down pretty pat. Very nice guy, says a lot, but then you're like, okay, what can I take away from this? I thought Kwesi gave you a little bit more to chew on as far as what the direction is. But you know what? In fairness, Matt, I think that there are a lot of, and this is not surprising, unknowns completely. Yep. I don't know. I think they have scenarios, but cornerback's a perfect one. I'm sure that at some point in time they would like to pursue a cornerback, probably coming out of his first contract in free agency. But, we've seen those prices go sky high, right? So if you can't do that, do you draft one first round? Can you count on Booth? I mean, guy is hurt all the time. A Caleb looked okay at times, but had 3 concussions. That could be, a career problem. Dantzler, where's he at? So I just think that there are, in fairness, I think that there are a lot of unknowns. But I do think that at least they have an idea on direction of things. And I do think that the change at DC is going to be incredibly important. I guess I'm a little bit curious offensively how they are going to become more consistent. And that, they're not going to answer that in March or in late February. But the disappearing act of the offense to me was very odd. First quarter, really good. Second, not so good. Third quarter, gone. Fourth quarter, bang, back. The offense is now this team's identity, which it should be. In 2023, the offense should be your team's identity. But you've got to have more consistency there too. And I just think that there's a lot of work to do personnel wise on both sides. And I am really curious to see who stays and who goes, especially when you look at the salary situation of guys like Cook, Thielen, Kendricks to a certain degree. I got to think he's gone. But there's just going to be a lot of interesting and probably in their mind, although I wouldn't call them tough, probably in their mind, tough decisions to make. I mean, it's a business. You got to do what you got to do to win.
Yeah, yeah, no more kicking the can down the road. It's time to have a new face of the Minnesota Vikings, and it starts with Justin Jefferson and
Amen.
a couple of the other young guys on rosters. So we're all anticipating and waiting for that first domino to fall, so we can truly speculate on kind of where this season and off season is headed. But I appreciate you hopping on to kind of
No
give
worries.
your recap of what's going on at the NFL Combine, and I'm sure the next month, the next couple weeks are going to be chaotic for
Isn't that
both of
great?
us. So I can't wait.
I love this stuff.
You can catch all Judd's work on Skor North, Purple Daily. If you're into the hockey scene, MinnesotaHockeyMag.com. And otherwise, you can check out Judd's comments on VikingsWire.com, where he's got takeaways from both the Kwesi and KOC pressers at the NFL Combine. If you haven't yet, you're welcome. If you haven't yet, please go like and subscribe our YouTube channel. Like Judd said, we got a lot of content that's going to be coming out because the Vikings offseason is just kicking off. So make sure you tune back into the next episode of Vikings Happy Hour. Until then, Skol Vikes.